Quick content warning, I talk about a violent video game with guns and blood and murder and other spooky stuff. So if you don't want to watch that, don't watch this. I may make a video in the future that will be more suitable to someone who is not desensitized to violence. I was pretty late to the party when it came to playing video games, like, on a regular basis. My family didn't get an Xbox 360 until 2015 because we weren't, particularly wealthy. It was a great experience, though, to get a console so late in its life cycle, because there were already so many games out for it, and they were all really cheap. It was like 4 or 5 years before I moved on from it. Every once in a while, my parents would go out grocery shopping or something, and they'd come back with like 2 or 3 games. They would just pick up something they wanted or something they thought looked cool, because my parents also occasionally played video games. One of these times, my mom brought home Tomb Raider from 2013, because she liked the movies from the 2000s. I don't remember being particularly interested, as I was probably playing Batman Arkham Asylum for like the 3rd time. Eventually, though, I did try it out, and I enjoyed the game quite a bit. I played through the game and finished it on Christmas Eve, taking for granted the cozy feeling I used to get from Christmas time, and the sense of accomplishment I used to get from finishing something. I liked it, I mean. I probably played it like 3 more times in the following years. It's a really solid game that combines rewarding exploration, fun combat, and intuitive puzzle solving really well. It has a really good story and setting with decent characters. It also has a female protagonist whose depiction doesn't make me hate video games and the people who play them with a burning passion, and make me angrily agree with that woman from BuzzFeed that everybody memed a few years ago.
I wrote a blog post a while ago about why I f***ing hate video games. Because this is what it does. It appeals to like the male fantasy.
She was right, by the way. People just hated on her for saying something controversial. Basically, the story of the game is that Laura and an older archaeologist, James Whitman, are on an expedition to find the lost kingdom of Yamatai, an ancient Japanese kingdom once ruled by Himiko, the Sun Queen. They are joined by Samantha, Laura's friend, who is also a descendant of Himiko. She's documenting the expedition for a prospective documentary starring Whitman. There's also Roth, captain of the Endurance and an old friend of Laura's. He acts as sort of a mentor to Laura, although at this point Laura is experienced enough so that all he really needs to do is just remind her of her capabilities. He's also voiced by Robin Atkin Downes.
Hamburger.
So all I hear when he speaks is a British version of Kaz from Metal Gear Solid, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
I'm the captain here. It's my decision. We're going into the Dragon's...
Another thing that I thought was really funny is that Robin Atkin Downes also does an additional voice in the game for a few of the journal entries, where he plays a German guy, so he literally just sounds like the medic from TF2.
Months of excavation has at last yielded new information concerning the weather patterns gripping this island.
Anyway, that's how I lost my medical license.
There's also Jonah, a guy from New Zealand that plays a more major role in the subsequent games, but still does cool stuff in this game, like cook and just be a big dude. There's also Reyes, the mechanic of the Endurance. There's Alex, redditor of the Endurance, and then the best character, Grim, helmsman of the Endurance, and the most intelligible Scottish person ever to exist.
Got 30 years experience, 2 PhDs, 1 in East Asian history, so why don't you just stick to boats, Mr. Grimm?
Ship, Dr. Whitman. It's a ship. You don't need a PhD to know that.
The cast besides Laura is less fleshed out, but they're honestly pretty excellent considering how many of them there are compared to the main cast of other games like Uncharted, where there's only like 2 or 3 side characters. Reyes, Alex, and James all have little character arcs that I thought were good. They weren't played out or unbelievable, and they don't distract from the more important parts of the plot. For example, Reyes doesn't trust Laura for pretty sound reasons. Laura is inexperienced, has little evidence to support changing the route of the expedition to the Dragon's Triangle, and her decision has deadly consequences for some characters. She doesn't outright hate Laura, though, and is reasonable and level-headed. Whenever she says something mean to Laura, she admits that she's wrong to say things like that.
Is she okay? Because it's all about Lara, isn't it? Have you forgotten that she's the reason we're here?
That's not fair, Reyes.
You're right. I shouldn't have said that.
So when she finally does come around and trusts Laura at the end of the game, it's believable. James Whitman's arc is also really great. I won't spoil it though, because it's important to the wider plot, but it has a lot to do with this discovery being the thing to jumpstart his career again, and he puts that above the safety of everyone else. It's a common thing in adventure stories like this, but it's done really well here, I think.
This female image is particularly interesting.
Anyways, the gang becomes stranded on the island of Yamatai after a storm wrecks the Endurance. Laura and company try to find a way off the island, uncovering the secrets the island holds of all the previous and current inhabitants. I'm not going to recount the whole plot here though, because I don't want to spoil the game or make the video too long. What's important though is that this is one of Laura's earliest adventures in which she is stranded on a mysterious and dangerous island and is tasked with getting herself and her friends home alive. The setting is honestly fantastic. Visually, it's beautiful and creepy. The game always brings me to such nice places. It takes you to the tops of cliffs above the sea, to the tops of forests. Even the shantytown level is visually impressive. It's so dense and cluttered. A lot of times when you're climbing someplace high, the camera will pan out to show you the surrounding environment or the deadly drop below you. The island is so weird and mysterious. There are the storms that cause shipwrecks and plane crashes, stopping anyone from leaving alive. There's the cult that kills any outsiders they can't indoctrinate, and there's the members of the cult, spanning many nationalities depending on where they came from. There are Americans, Germans, Russians, and people of other nationalities in the cult. What's really cool about the mix of nationalities is how it influences the gameplay and setting. You'll explore ancient Japanese ruins, Japanese bunkers from World War II, and a German research facility. The weapons you get from the enemies are also from different backgrounds. The rifle, for instance, goes from a World War II Japanese machine gun to a Kalashnikov. Roth even procures a Gewehr, a German rifle. I think this detail is a really cool extension of the idea that everything the locals have comes from shipwrecks from many different places and times, and how the island in general is just a mishmash of different stuff. The gameplay is pretty great too. It combines exploration and combat really well so that neither become arduous or annoying. Exploration involves the normal progression of the game since the game is about exploring the island, but also the exploration of areas in the game for relics, salvage, journals, and tombs.
I hate tombs. A Sun Queen and her Storm Guard.
I remember the first time I played this game, I avoided doing any of the optional tombs. When in subsequent playthroughs I explored the tombs, they turned out to be pretty good. The tombs in this game contain puzzles that you solve to open a larger version of the briefcase from Pulp Fiction that has a skill point inside. It doesn't take too much time, and the puzzles are usually either engaging or easy enough not to make it such an ordeal to explore a tomb. The combat is also a great part of the game. It feels scrappy and imprecise in a good way. What I mean is the weapons are secondhand and presumably really old. The first version of the rifle is inaccurate, but fun to use at close range. Some of the upgrades to the weapons are just taped on or strapped on with some other binding. The melee finishes are desperate and brutal, and then they become Doom-esque towards the end of the game when you unlock weapon executions. The lack of a definite button to lock you into cover like Gears of War adds to the scrappy feeling too, and I love it. I also feel like the game was going for a survival horror spin on the adventure game genre, which I think it totally nails. You're constantly getting thrown into creepy tombs and cult layers where you crawl under boulders and squeeze through cracks in the wall. There are bodies all over the place in some areas and other creepy elements that add to this feeling. This game also uses the survival horror trope of isolation from other people to sell the tone of the game. You only reunite with other survivors occasionally between gameplay, kind of like Resident Evil 1 and Dead Space. A lot of the set pieces also sell the survival horror aspect of the game, putting Laura in very tense and precarious positions. There are also a lot of climbing parts too, where you're on a very unsteady surface that feels like it could fall apart, or is falling apart. Sometimes the wind is blowing and the camera shakes so that it's harder to focus on what you're doing. Of course, this is a trope of the adventure game genre, but I feel like it's sort of mixed in with the survival horror stuff I mentioned. There are also a lot of set pieces where if you fail to dodge some obstacle or something, Laura dies pretty brutally. The one I remember the most is one of the parts where you're sliding down a hill with a bunch of debris on it, and a big spike goes straight through Laura's neck. It's pretty crazy. Laura's depiction here is actually pretty good. A lot better than the previous games. Before this game, she was depicted, unrealistically. I mean, take a look at the cover art of Tomb Raider Underworld, the last mainline Tomb Raider game before this one. It looks like a parody of itself. You can't even see her fucking face. If you told me this was for an, adult film, I wouldn't even question it. But in Tomb Raider 2013, Laura dresses and acts like a normal person would in such a situation as hers. In A Feminist Review's Tomb Raider's Lara Croft, Carol Pinchevsky writes, "This new Laura is less pneumatic, more athletic. Instead of strappy short shorts, she wears cargo pants. Because of the fabulous motion capture technology Crystal Dynamics uses, we can focus more on her face and her expressions more than her overall physical assets. This, however, did not stop the Steam community section of the game from being an absolute trash fire. There is a ton of terrible fan art and such that makes me want to scream. There's a similar issue with Bioshock Infinite's community section as well, because God forbid you put a female character in a game, lest she become subject to the desires of grody men on the internet. This is the kind of thing that makes me want to just stare at Judith beheading Holofernes by Artemisia Gentileschi for several minutes with violence and hatred in my heart. Laura's character and Camilla Luddington's vocal performance are really great too. Laura is really expressive in this game. Pinchevsky also wrote, "This Laura is fantastically expressive and conveys pain, frustration, wonder, hope, and even more pain in a way that sets a new bar for other game protagonists of any gender to reach for." Another thing, not an actual criticism, but one thing I think is funny about her performance though, is at one point she yells threateningly at the enemies, but it just kind of sounds expressionless. Maybe like she's scared.
Run, you bastards! I'm coming for you all!
But it reminded me of the parts in the English dub of Serial Experiments Lain when Lain speaks authoritatively, and it sounds really stilted.
Why don't you shut up? Who the hell cares about any of that old crap anyway? Don't waste my time.
Pinchevsky also wrote, "The good news is, this version of Laura, while definitely off-balance and vulnerable, is one we can empathize with, and doesn't project an aura of needing help. Quite the opposite, in fact. The game does an absolutely superb job of balancing her between inexperience and determination. Laura might be wounded and afraid, but she's going to press on regardless. We do root for her, but she also demands our respect." Laura has long been considered one of the most well-regarded characters in video game history. Now she's one of the most real. Laura doesn't really react to the notes she finds, even the ones you'd think would be more important, like the note she finds that confirms Grimm survived the wreck, which until now we did not know. It's not a big deal. She finds Grimm in a cutscene like 2 seconds later and reacts accordingly, so it's not super jarring, just a little weird. The only one she reacts to is towards the end of the game, which reveals where she needs to go next at that point in the story to find some clue. It's not like every game can have the character react to the notes, like in The Last of Us, where Joel reads a note and is like, "Damn, Ellie, this guy died because he ate 500,000 crackers. Truly, this is an interesting little case of the follies of human nature. I trust we can all appreciate the dramatic irony of a man dying from sustenance during one of the most dangerous times in which one can live." She implies the Edo period is ancient at one point.
In Edo, Japan, traditional men's garments had no pockets. Inro were miniature containers used to hold personal effects, like an ancient form of wallet.
But it lasted from 1603 to 1868. That's right, I watched Samurai Champloo. I know all about the Edo period and the breakdancing that occurred during that time. There's this part where Laura is examining this broken sword and she cuts herself and is like, still sharp.
It's beautiful. Still sharp.
And I think this is a Lord of the Rings reference, because Boromir does the same thing and says the same thing.
From Sauron's hand. Still sharp.
I want you. What?
I'm glad they didn't really mention Trinity a lot in this game. Apparently, if you find all the GPS caches, there's a secret story about a Trinity operative going to the island for the same reason as you, but outside of that, there's only one note that I found that briefly mentions them. I feel like with reboots and prequels, writers really like to throw hints and mentions of in-universe stuff right into the audience's face for fan service, or to establish stuff for future installments. I like that they didn't mention Trinity to this extent, because it would have been really jarring if Lara, who at this point is more interested in getting off the island than the archaeological discoveries she went to find there in the first place, went on some story tangent involving Trinity. I played Rise of the Tomb Raider a few years later when we finally got an Xbox One, and I thought it was alright. I got kind of bored playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider though, and I never got very far into it. Hey, maybe I'll go and play them now to postpone the ever-present threat of me running out of ideas for videos. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to say about this game. I think it's pretty great and you should play it if you like video games. It took me about 10 hours to beat this time, which I like. I miss when you could beat a game in like a week instead of taking a month to play like half of it and then getting bored and dropping it forever. I didn't go too in-depth in this video because I wanted it to be sort of light and fun, just about something that I like. I plan on making more videos where I just talk about stuff like this, in this format where I just mostly focus on the good parts and I'm not super critical. Plus, I'm scared of being critical because what if my negative opinion or something is wrong and someone in the comments just completely dismantles my arguments? I don't know if I can take that kind of rejection. Thanks to anyone who watched this for watching this. This is the first video I've ever spent this much time writing, recording, and editing. I'm happy with how it turned out, and I had a lot of fun making this, and I'll be sure to make more videos in the future about things that I like in hopes that you turn up again. Bye bye!
Halo, it's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.
What I